a Kangaroofern production.
If you want to be a freelance podcast producer, freelance host, whatever it is, just hustle, and you're going to feel rejected and you're going to feel upset, and it doesn't feel nice, but that's what makes you stronger to get to the next place. That's what makes you appreciate when you get there. Like before I got Netflix, I was just deflated. Yeah, I had a few jobs. They were amazing. They were great. I worked with great people. But working for Netflix and Finder and Queensland University and all of those, I had to go through 100 rejections to actually appreciate what I have now. So rejection is a good thing.
Hello everyone, it's Miko Santos again from the Kangaroofern Media Lab, and welcome to another episode of That Podcast Exchange. And for today's episode, we're talking to a multi-award winning freelance podcast producer. Oh, that's big. All right. Her name is Pariya Taherzadeh. Hope it's the correct pronunciation. So, Pariya, her freelance journey began just 3 years into career, which started with a diversity scholarship at the Australian Film, Television and Radio School. In 2019, she produced and narrated the audio documentary Escape from Iran, which won a gold prize in history and silver and social issue at the 2020 New York Radio Festival Awards. So please welcome to the show at That Podcast Exchange, Pariya Taherzadeh. Hey, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's go back. So you are multi-award winning podcast producer. Before taking into podcasting, I was curious about the documentary that you did, The Escape from Iran. So I read a little bit about that your mom smuggled you out from Iran on a camel to start a new life in Australia. Can you tell us about what really happened on that?
Yeah, sure. So we came to Australia as refugees, and when the revolution happened in Iran in 1979, my mum had experienced freedom before that. And then all of a sudden the revolution happens and women, are oppressed, have to cover themselves, don't have the same rights, especially in terms of religion. Her religion being Baha'i wasn't recognized. They made, people convert, and if they wouldn't convert, you'd either get kidnapped or tortured or thrown in jail and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty much like a day-to-day, risk that my mum would take, especially marrying a Muslim who was my father. So 6 years after it, I was born a few years in, and she was just like, I'm not having this for my daughter anymore. Sold everything, got up and left. And so had to escape through to Pakistan on camelback, literally because they would deny her passports, being from the Baha'i faith. Weren't allowed to have passports, whereas my dad, who was Muslim, would just jumped on a plane and got to Pakistan 3 months after we arrived. It was growing up. I always kind of had that story. A lot of my friends, in terms of from the same community, would have similar stories. My grandparents came the same way. My aunties and uncles all came the same way. So to me, it was quite normal, But then as I grew up and got older, a lot of people would be like, oh my God, really? That's what happened? Like you actually escaped on a camel? And so I realized what a great opportunity and story it is to tell, especially to kind of be able to honor my mum for doing something like that. I wanted to be able to tell her story, because once she goes, I was too young to remember it. So I wanted to be able to have that. So it started off as a side project at uni at Afters. And then when I went to ABC, I was lucky enough to have it pitched and got it commissioned.
And got award from the New York Festival.
And got an award from it. I know. Yeah. I just, my husband now, yeah, we were married at the time. My husband, Vic, he really pushed me into applying for the award. And he's like, you've got nothing to lose. The best advice anyone can give really is literally, I would have nothing to lose. I would have been in the same position if I didn't win, as if I didn't apply. So I'm really glad that he really pushed me to do that.
That's fantastic. So, what's happening right now in Ukraine? A lot of refugees moving out because of war happening.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Because it's experience with your mom during the revolution.
Yeah.
What is your, as a podcast producer, uh, what can you do for people
Yeah.
like them?
I think when it comes to, because I didn't really live it. The only thing that I have memories of is coming to Australia and being literally an outcast compared to, especially in the 90s, compared to everyone else that was around. And I grew up in Adelaide, so I was quite different. But I would say that my mum and my parents caught the brunt of that. They were, in their mid-20s, so they really knew what it was like. But there's really a sense of displacement from anyone that you talk to that's a refugee, and even myself. I always felt displaced. And so I guess what people would do, I'm not the serious kind of person. I'm not political or anything like that. That's why I got into podcasting and do, funny podcasts. So I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I would say if it comes to podcasting and something, such a serious topic, is the best thing you could do for everybody, including yourself being a podcaster, is being open and doing your research, not just taking on fake news, making sure that when you get your information from certain people at outlets, they're not fanatics, that believe in a particular country and their regime. And in the same way, they're not completely, for Western society. Like, it needs to be a great balance. And media outlets like the ABC do that, and SBS do that very well. And so, a word of caution is definitely make sure you know where your information's coming from.
I totally agree with that. So
Mm.
let's go back to into podcasting. How did you come up of being a podcast producer? Is that since you're later or because of the side project you get
Yeah.
interested in podcasting?
Yeah. So I did my afters degree when I was in my 30s. So I am complete, like everybody else in my class. Well, there was a big, like probably 10 people in my class. A majority of them had just come out of, uni doing their first degree. So they were 19, 20, 21. So I was quite late to the game, but I was kind of a little bit lost in what I wanted to do with my career. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do this radio course. With that, I got the scholarship. But when I did the course, I thought, you know what, I want to get into hosting. I want to be in front of the mic. I want to have the opportunity to, I don't know, I think the same reason everybody does podcasting, to be heard, right? And then as kind of the course progressed, I realized actually being on radio, being on air is quite difficult. It's a skill that you really do need to gain. Some people have it, some people don't. There's a format, there's a formula that goes with presenting in whatever kind of aspect, in whatever format that you wanna present in. And then as time went on, I got with the scholarship that I had the opportunity to work with the ABC full time for a year. And then that's when I was able to get onto my Escape from Iran being commissioned with that particular department that I was working at the ABC. So long story short, I kind of fell into producing, but I actually quite love it. So being able to produce but also create my own podcast for Escape from Iran, and then I've done one recently, Gila's Drive for Freedom, which again is the story of my mum, but this time the angle was around my mum not being able to, get her truck license in Iran, and her hopes and dreams being shattered again because of the revolution. So with those kind of projects, I am able to host am able to kind of script and tell the story in a way that I do. And so I think when people think of hosting, they think of just being on a show like this, whereas you really need to open your mind and think, okay, is there a story that I can kind of put together, report on, script, and then voice myself? Because if you do have an idea and you pitch it to somebody like ABC or other media outlets, then they definitely will look at it and hopefully commission it, and that's another way to be able to host. But in terms of producing, I quite like it because I was always organized. I came from a corporate background. So, and that's what a producer does. A producer has to make sure that everybody's on time, everyone has the right information. You have the script, the meetings are, you do the pre-production meeting and the editorial meetings and the debrief meetings. And, there's a lot to producing. And I think anyone outside of making a podcast really has no idea how much is involved. You're a one-man band really in most cases. So
Yeah, so I totally agree with that one. So you have to, especially if you have a team, it's hard to coordinate with the team, with the editor, with the copywriter, show notes writer,
yeah,
sort
yeah.
of everything, sound engineer. So on the podcasting, did you realize that podcasting been booming straight away because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. So when I was doing my course at uni at Afters, there was a big majority of just the question was in class, who wants to be on talkback and who wants to be on commercial radio, right? When I went back to lecture last year at Afters, the question then became who wants to be in radio and who wants to be in podcasting. And out of the 20 people that were in the class, 15 or 20 people, I would say literally 2 people raised their hand for radio. Everybody else was podcast. And that was in 4 years alone. So just the interest in the whole, industry has boomed absolutely because of COVID. People needed to stay sane. COVID is, hectic, as we're not even in it as much anymore, and it's quite full on. So within that period, absolutely, people were like, I would have thought it would have been the opposite, that people don't want to spend money and really have to work, to make sure that they're safe financially and so on and so forth. But on an individual, very indie scale, it very much boomed, very much.
So why do you think it's boom? What's the benefit of being an audio only instead of video?
Well, I mean, I can only speak for myself. It is so much easier to edit. Like for me, I really praise, and if you could insert like a standing ovation sound effect here, that would be great, because I genuinely do praise people that have the ability to edit audio and visual. There's just another layer that's added to the visual aspect, and it's so difficult. And it's a skill, just like audio editing is. But like I said, it's that added extra layer. So, and we have so many programs now, like Audacity, GarageBand. You might get Pro Tools or Audition or any of these kind of things that you can buy on, just everyday people can buy. You don't need to be a company or a big organization to purchase these editing suites, and it makes it so much easier. It doesn't matter whether it's audio or visual.
Yeah, especially if you have, the script, it's easy.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
exactly.
like done
Scripting
before or
is
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
How
exactly.
technology helped podcasting, being a podcaster and podcasters producer as well. What do you advise to say people who is wanted to be like you, being a podcast
Mhm.
producer?
Well, when I left my job, um, I had nothing. I didn't even have one client. So then I hustled and I emailed and I LinkedIn any like companies that I knew. I did my research. I reached out to, podcast production companies, media companies, anyone, and I let them know, hey, I'm now freelancing, if you need any work, here's my resume. And I always update my LinkedIn, and I have a website. And I also find having a website, doesn't matter whether it's a 5-pager or a 1-pager, really, really helps kind of solidify people, so it helps solidify for people that you are actually serious, and you can create it yourself on Squarespace or whatever. I personally didn't, but I know those platforms are available. And I think if whoever's interested does do a few side gigs for, as a junior editor or as a junior producer, then taking the time to put that on your website or on your LinkedIn, because we're such an audio kind of industry, people need to listen to your work. Obviously, it's not just it's not as easy as like reading or finding an article, because SEO really has to be on par. It's the searching for someone that's a good audio producer or editor just by their podcast alone can be really difficult, because you have to have good copy, good SEO backing, all that kind of stuff. So if you have that LinkedIn, and a lot of my jobs I've gotten from LinkedIn. So I think that that's really beneficial for people to get out there. It doesn't matter what you've got on it. It doesn't matter if you've done community work or, work experience or internship for free. Whatever you have done, put it on there. And if you haven't done anything, well, get some, audio together, get your friends together, do one podcast. You're really just trying to show your skill when it doesn't have to be this big production. It's simplicity at its finest, really.
Yeah, so optimize your LinkedIn because
Yes. You think I'm an ambassador for them, but I really do believe that it's very useful, especially when I do a search for a podcast producer on LinkedIn. I don't find a lot, not in Sydney, and I think that's because we don't utilize it as well as we should, unless I don't know how to use LinkedIn. That might be the problem. But yeah, I definitely utilize and optimize LinkedIn.
in line with that, um, how is Australia in podcasting? Are
I
we
think,
coping up? Are we still
yeah.
on?
You took the words out of my mouth. I do think we're catching up. We're definitely, I don't want to say we're behind, but I think the interest took a while to get to us, and the faith in kind of podcasting took a while to reach us before it did in America, as is the case with a lot of things in Australia. And I think like we're just, as a country and a culture, we're kind of a little bit more cautious. And so hence why we're, probably a few years behind. But I definitely think that we're getting there quite fast. And COVID definitely, like we said before, definitely helped us shoot our way up.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because I don't know because for me most of my client is in the US outside so of inside in Australia. It's hard to get client in Australia. I don't know why, but so the
Yeah.
next question I have is I most of the Facebook group that belong to Australia, they usually do DIY. What is your advice to a podcaster you're doing do it yourself?
Be prepared to put in a lot of time and effort and give up sometimes. Like it's just because there's so much that goes into it. It's difficult and you do want to give up, but my advice is just persist. Even if you have to put out. So actually, let me take it back. Pre-plan, because that's really important. And if you pre-plan, there's more chance that you would actually get at least one season done. And so when you pre-plan and you have at least three episodes up, I think that gives you the motivation to keep going. As the age-old cliche goes, the hardest part is always starting. And so the pre-planning is probably where you'd kind of get excited and get in the mode. But definitely, yeah, you need to put at least, a few. Like, let me give you an example. It takes me 8 hours to edit a 30-minute video. It takes, 2 hours to probably do my research and make sure I script, properly and then another hour to get research for potential talent, and then you have to organize yourself and your co-host. Right there, you're looking at 11 hours. And if you're working full time, that's probably what you're going to be doing on the weekend or a couple of hours after work. So don't think it's an easy thing to do. Even if you're doing it at the most basic level, you need to know that don't be discouraged if you feel like it's taking too much time. Put the time and effort in, because it will get listened to. Even if it's by one person, hey, it might be the right person, you know?
Yeah, correct. Especially a lot of work behind the scene of the podcast. It's not only recording. It's after that. There's a lot. Alright,
Post-production.
so
Yeah. Post-production, making sure, like, if you have a host or whoever it is, a producer maybe, and you're a host, making sure everyone agrees with the edit, and making sure the show notes are correct, making sure you have the correct title, making sure it's on the, even when it's up, sometimes you need to make sure after it that, hey, is it still there, or has something happened to the platform, or has something happened to the website? It's constant. Yeah.
thank you for that. So last question I have for you, or second to the last, maybe. What are you most exciting about this year
You mean in the podcast world, or just
in the
anything?
podcast world, or
Yeah,
what you up to
anything.
this year?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to freelance for Netflix. So we have another, 10 or 20 episodes to go with them. So I'm quite looking forward to having that, and then, whatever comes my way, so be it. Also, the New York Radio Festival Awards are coming up again. So fingers crossed. I've applied again. So everyone in the podcast universe, please podcast pray for me. I don't know, is that a thing? But yeah, so I'm looking to kind of, expand and get to know new clients, and hustle my way through, which is what you do as a freelancer. But yeah.
All right. So we know it's podcast movement is happening right now. So I'll be quite awake till tonight, starting tonight. Very excited with that.
Yeah.
So question I have for you is more on the diversity and
Mhm.
especially women in podcasting. So
Mhm.
on my team, I got most of my team is women and
Mhm.
multicultural.
Yes.
What's happening with the diversity, especially women in podcasting? Is that getting more traction than men right now?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. In my experience, anyway, a lot of the people that I've interacted with have mainly been women or people from diverse backgrounds. Um, and I think it's such a beautiful thing, because we do we do get held back in society, unfortunately. That's just, the way that the world works. And thankfully, with the Black Lives Matter, things have kind of been brought to light and at the forefront that it needs to change. And I was talking to someone quite recently, and they were saying, this person was a chef, in quite a predominant restaurant within Sydney. And she was saying that sometimes she gets approached and gets asked, gets told, we need a woman to be on this panel for X, Y, and Z. And she was actually quite disappointed at the beginning. And she didn't want to be a tick box. I tend to disagree with that. And I think you need to be a tick box of, like, diversity and women. And yes, we have this, like, X amount, 50% of whatever culture or whatever sex or whatever, identity. That needs to be a tick box in order for it to become normal. And I think that that's the way and the avenue that podcasting is going down, thankfully. Women are creative, and I'm not going to say women, like, that probably sounded super sexist, but we do have a lot to offer, and we're very emotive. And that's, I'm generalizing here, but I do feel like the emotive side of a woman, or anyone that's emotive, is what brings out a story, and that's such a beautiful thing. And if a woman can contribute, or someone from a diverse background can contribute with their story, then it's a beautiful thing.
So if you have one billboard, what would you write to that billboard to advise anyone who's listening right now and watching the podcast as well?
Yeah. Um, I would say go do that course, do the short course that you've been thinking about for a long time and haven't had time to do it. Make time for it. Get in touch with that person that you think might not want to hear from you, or that, do you know how many people that I've messaged haven't messaged me back on LinkedIn or email, or, there's a lot of people that will probably see your email and not contact them, but it's that one or two that are really important, and that's about the hustle. So if you want to be a freelance podcast producer, freelance host, whatever it is, just hustle, and you're going to feel rejected and you're going to feel upset, and it doesn't feel nice, but that's what makes you stronger to get to the next place. That's what makes you appreciate when you get there. Like before I got Netflix, I was just deflated. Yeah, I had a few jobs. They were amazing. They were great. I worked with great people. But working for Netflix and Finder and Queensland University and all of those, I had to go through 100 rejections to actually appreciate what I have now. So rejection is a good thing. It's a cliche. I know everyone says it and hears it, but there's definite truth to it.
Thank you for that. So, if anyone want to contact you online, how they can connect with you, Pariya?
Sure, you can jump on my LinkedIn, or you can go to pariya.com.au and send me a message. Otherwise, my email is talent@pariya.com.au. If you've got any questions, I'm always more than willing to help. I know I started out as a little podcast producer, not knowing much either. So if we can all help each other, why not?
Thank you for that. So yeah, so just shoot a connection on LinkedIn with Pariya, and she's happy to have a chat with you. And thank you for your time, Pariya. I hope
No,
you. I know it's been a little bit long than we expected, but
fine.
thank you for your time, and see you again for hopefully another interview in couple of
Hopefully.
weeks or year time.
For sure. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria. So this is
No
another
worries.
episode of that podcast exchange. So see you in 2 weeks' time. And don't forget, if you are early stage podcaster, service provider, we have a new community. Just go to podcastcreatorsociety.com. Thank you. Bye.
Are you ready to finally start your own podcast? Maybe you already have one, but need a podcast manager to help you level up. We're here for either. Book a call at www.kangaroofern.com. www.kangaroofern.com.